country's grandma. It was a bit like sad goth Christmas. I cannot promise you I would line up to say goodbye to my mum for that long. Time of need, what do? We queue. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, I'm Yvette and I moved to the UK 3 years ago and I'm documenting my experience. I'm back, sorry I've been away a long time. I think you all know why. I have been grieving. And the fun thing about depression is you lose the will to do almost anything, including your hobbies. So I'm excited to be back. I'm rejuvenated with the will to create again. And yeah, so thanks for everyone who's been patient. Yeah, losing your friend with cancer is unbelievably painful and terrible. So yes, we're just doing what we can. I have done not much. My work's been quite busy and I did do a holiday on safari. So tell me if you're interested. I'll make a video about my experience. I didn't vlog it. Like I said, I just wasn't in the right mind space to be doing anything a lot, but I'm excited to be back and hopefully you'll forgive me my absence. Now, when I was away, I was going to create a video last weekend, but the Queen died. And so I thought it was a fantastic time to make a video and come back because one, I'm an expert in funerals and death and terrible things of British culture, which I didn't want to ever be. Also, the Queen dying is such a monumental cultural event and historic event that it seems irresponsible not to document. Like, this is something I will look back on, you know, when I'm, 80 years old and be like, I was there when there was a queen, like my kids will only know kings, which is a bit mad to think about. But yeah, so I thought for this video, we can talk about that. I'll tell you some of my thoughts, opinions, blah. I want to talk about the queue, trademarked, the queue, and then the actual funeral that was on Monday because we had a bank holiday. So the Queen died in Balmoral. I kind of got the gist that it was not looking good when all the BBC presenters started wearing black ties at around 2 o'clock. I was like, it's not a false alarm, because also the notice was like, oh, Queen's under medical supervision and is comfortable. One, she's 96 and the Queen, she's always under medical supervision. She's never not. And anyone who works in the medical industry or has ever lost someone knows comfortable means awaiting death, but we're gonna drug them to high heaven so they have a good time while they wait. Kind of expected it, but it was still insane, and I know a lot of you might be feeling some raw emotions because a lot of I've noticed the British people are obviously much more affected than say Australia or Canada, even though we have the Queen as our monarch still. I think it's just so much more closer to home. It's obviously dredged up a lot of feelings and emotions around monarchy, colonialism, blah. I'm not going to start a war in the comments. I think the most important thing is to be respectful for the family regardless of anything. So even if this person, which is not what I'm saying the Queen is at all, but even if it's like the worst serial killer or something in whatever, and they've died, they're not here anymore to hurt. So I don't know why people are going out of their way to make hurtful comments when the person you're trying to hurt is no longer here. All you're doing is hurting the family, which is not fair in my opinion. I'm sorry. Even though I'm not Charles's biggest fan, I just think it's a bit cruel to be like kicking someone when they're down. Like, at the end of the day, it was his mum, So also get your facts straight. Like, I saw so many wrong historic claims like around colonialism. Like, she's old, but she's not that old, guys. She actually decolonized most of the world. The Crown obviously different, but then the Crown is like, why are you having that conversation now? Is there not a better time? So that's my feelings on the whole thing. I know it got very political for a minute there. I think the only people, massive asterisks, only people I think that can have like a genuine rage against this specific monarch is probably the Irish because of the Troubles was a good chunk of her reign. Like, was actually her decisions and was involved. So yeah, I understand them, but yeah, everybody else I was like, it was before her time. So anyways, I look forward to having to turn the comments off from all of the controversy. So fun. Now, I've got a highlights reel of the funeral. I watched little bits of it because it literally went from 8 AM to like 5 PM and I was like, I've got different things to do. I left it on, but I only saw bits of it. I felt like that day, the public holiday, bank holiday, was a bit like sad goth Christmas, because like everything was shut and everyone had to stay home and there was only one thing on TV and like you couldn't do anything else. And then at the afternoon at like 4 o'clock, everyone goes for like their afternoon walk, just like on Christmas. It was weird. It was like goth Christmas. Okay, so I have a highlight reel of the funeral because we're not going to sit through, you know, 12 hours of funeral footage. And I've also got some of the queue because I want to remember that because I think it's insane. We'll start with the queue. So what they did was they had a queue around London. They had a queue going to see the respects of the Queen. Queen died in Balmoral, which is in Scotland, her favourite palace. And then they had they drove the coffin down the country and then on the train for a large chunk of it, and people paid their respects. It was a hearse with the flag on it and everything, and everyone came out to, you know, say their goodbyes, which I thought was very sweet. And then they put her in the chapel in London and everyone queued up for their chance to pay their respects to her coffin, and it was guarded 24/7, and the queue went on literally I think they closed an hour a day for cleaning, and like that was it. So the queue got mental. Here we go.
Hello and good morning from Westminster, where Her Majesty the Queen is lying in state. All through the night, thousands of people have been queuing for hours to file past the coffin and pay their respects. You can see many of them behind me and around me.
I think it's just so funny that the British way of paying respects, like their immediate thing is like, we have to queue. It's just so, like, it's just, I love it. It's not a critique in the slightest. It's just, it's almost stereotypical because British people love queuing, and then the time of need, what do they do? We queue. It's cute, I like it.
Blackfriars Bridge. It's one of the points where people can join. The people have been
it's like
coming
Disneyland
to Westminster expecting to join and being told that the beginning of the queue is in fact several miles away. But what should people who join the queue expect? Well, the lying in state began yesterday.
It looped all around London and actually made getting in and around London quite painful because all the road closures and queue was just everywhere.
Of the Queen's funeral. The queue is expected to stretch for several miles throughout that time.
Okay, here you go. That's the queue. South Bank, South Walk, Southwick. And she's at Westminster Hall. One thing I really like about this is I find all of the pageantry around the funeral, including the actual thing, is so historic and medieval that I feel like we never see that anymore, and I think that's super interesting. Even this, you know, paying your respects and queuing to go, you know, say goodbye, like that even in itself seems quite, like, I don't, like, this queue went at one point for 5 miles or 5.5 miles and 15 hours. I cannot promise you I would line up to say goodbye to my mum for that long. Like, I feel like it's not what she would have wanted. She would have wanted me not to queue. But I heard all these stories of people, like, because you're stuck with someone for 15 hours, like, and often that is overnight, and it wasn't the warmest time of year. It could have been worse, could have been like January, but it was still quite cool. And like, there's, you know, you've got to bring your own food and drinks and all that kind of stuff. And so people built a sense of community around that, and you had your queue buddy and they would hold your place while you went to the toilet. And then there was one bit where apparently someone had like a bag of like, goodies, and they would just walk around going, lucky dip, stick your head in and see what you get, and like giving stuff out. And I think I didn't line up to see the Queen. If I'd realised how massive the whole thing would have gotten, I regret not going like straight away and like when it opened, because I think the queue was only like 6 hours at that point, which is like nothing compared to the 15. Yeah, but then I started getting FOMO from not seeing the Queen. I just wanted to experience the queue culture. I think that it was so beautiful. British people coming together in time of need.
Dignity of the event, and remain silent and dress appropriately while inside the Palace of Westminster. Filming, photography and the use of mobile phones aren't allowed inside, but there is quite a sight when you get to Westminster Hall. I think we can look inside the magnificent hall itself, or what people find when they finally reach.
I will say the organisation on this thing is mad. Backdrop on this, crazy.
On either side of where the Queen is lying in state, on top of the platform.
This guy here. I don't know his rank. I'm ignorant.
The guard is standing.
We need to talk about the headdress.
All four corners.
Can we not fix it? Or why is it a mop?
Before they move on, but everybody who's been coming out has been reporting that it feels long enough to feel that they have been part of this, that they have been part of a historic moment that will not be seen again, even after several hours of waiting in the queue, paying their respects in whatever way they want to.
I did love that they had the crown on the coffin. I thought that was a beautiful touch. And also a beautiful headpiece.
Live stream, so you can absolutely get a sense of what...
I love that they had a queue website so you could see. So this, I know this is it got so much longer than this. Because the queue culture became, then it became the queue was the thing to do. Now, controversial question. Do we think she was in the coffin? Some people say yes, history, this whole thing screams pageantry and performance and procedure. I get. However, if I was the Queen, or if I was Charles, would I risk the public doing something and like harming her? Would they have let, maybe they would have, I don't know. People say, oh, it's lead lined. Oh, the coffin's heavy. She's in there, she doesn't come out. Maybe so. Maybe it's a practice coffin. We don't know. The queue, then there was the controversy of the queue jump. Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby decided to use their press passes to get in to pay respects, and then they've been absolutely scrambling since then to cover their tracks because David Beckham lined up with everybody else, which, by the way, would be your best queue buddy of all time, is if David Beckham's like, yeah, just doing my bit. But yeah, so I think, once again, I just think it's very interesting and very entertaining to think that the ultimate betrayal you can do and the ultimate offence you can do to the British public is queue jump, which isn't surprising in the slightest, but I think it's perfect in every way. And also I hate queue jumping. Okay, so we've seen the queue, we've talked to the queue, we've talked to queue jumpers, we've talked everything. Let's go on to the actual funeral day. I have the biggest moments. These guys, the navy that walked behind, truly walked all over London. I think it's interesting that people have phones out. Like, this is the most videoed thing of all time. This whole thing seems medieval in a perfect way, in a great way. And like the reason I like living in a historic place. Like a scepter? Amazing. I love Princess Anne, by the way. That's my new girl crush. I know there's no way of it happening, but I wish Princess Anne was the next one. Also, George is like a little mini William. Like, he's identical. It's super cute. The girls looked great. Meghan and Catherine, very respectful. I always feel bad for kids in this situation because I know the same thing happened with Will and Harry with their mum when they had to walk behind her coffin. So I'm surprised they're getting the kids to do it because I know they've said how traumatic that was, and I think it would be. Particularly like traumatic for a normal child, let alone one being like, this is the most viewed thing in history. And you've got to make sure you look sad enough. Yeah, it's a bit hard for a 10-year-old or however old he is. So the Westminster Abbey, which is nice because that's where I think she was married and coronated. Charles looks actually like sad. That's gonna make me cry. Look at him. Ah, stop it. I don't even like Charles. It's making me sad. I don't even like him. So they had a service at the Westminster Abbey, and it was nice. Very quite religious because obviously ordained by God, all that jazz. And then they took her body to Westminster and did another one because that's where Windsor, sorry, because that's where she'll be staying. These coffin bearers, pallbearers, is that what you call them? They were fantastic. They so synchronized. Everyone was so synchronized. Couldn't handle it. I can't even do a TikTok dance. Oh, look at Anne. Big Owen. Personally, loved that Andrew couldn't wear his uniform, because I think that would bother him, and that makes me happy, because we all know. Oh, all the fresh haircuts from the pallbearers, I see, which is good. I loved seeing the array of different hats we have in this country. What are these? Massive feathers. And the mop men. Then the beef eaters. Do you know Anne almost got kidnapped once, and then they tried to kidnap her and they said, come with me, and she said, not bloody likely. And then, since then, she's been my fave. No, second fave, well, she's my fave. Second fave is Charlotte. She reminds me of Hermione Granger. So I think this coffin is lead lined, and that's why they've got so many pallbearers, and you can see they're doing a fantastic job, but you can tell it's heavy, and she was a small woman, so I can't imagine if it's... And they brought out the Corgis. Okay, this is when she got to Windsor. This is where she spent most of her time, her home. And they brought out the Corgis, and I was like, it's sad the Queen's died, absolutely. It's always sad when anyone dies. I could walk into a stranger's funeral and start crying because I think it's sad. But she was also 96, so it's not the most tragic, understanding my own experience recently of like, well, she lived a great life and she achieved great things and she experienced a lot of love. You know, it's sad, but it's more of, sometimes I find a funeral, particularly when their partner's gone, is more happy because you're like, oh, they're reunited. You know, I had that with my grandparents and things like that. So it's bittersweet, you know, because you don't want to live to like 150. You would not be having a great quality of life, you know? So it's very bittersweet, particularly when I've lost someone recently when they were 30 and you're like, there is nothing sweet about this. And then they bring out the dogs and I'm like, I'm a mess. Not the dogs who don't understand and they just want to see their mum. Look at that dog. And corgis, which I've realized Bambi kind of looks like a corgi, so I now have a natural affinity to them. Bringing out the dogs to say goodbye, honestly, I can't. Oh, that grass. Who's your landscaper? Windsor Castle is beautiful if you haven't been. I have been. I think I did a video on it. Can't remember. I haven't seen any of this. So, okay. I imagine that is giving the crown to Charles. Okay, yeah. And this, I watched a thing on it. Actually, I have no idea what Charles is doing. But the gentleman next to him. This ceremony is to signify the end of her reign. This would be so hard to do. I know she's 96 and it is bittersweet and I stand by everything, but I think no matter how old you are, losing your mum is always really hard. And then having to do this performance, like I couldn't do anything when Charlotte died and she wasn't my mum. Like, I don't know how the royal family is doing this. I give them credit for that. This is the magic wand that signifies her reign, the Elizabethan reign. So now that they've snapped it is signifying that it is no longer. I read that. And it'll be buried with her. They also brought out her horses to say goodbye, which also was heartbreaking. Animals. They get me. Also, did you know that when they had, when Prince Philip died, they had her favourite horse, Emma, pull the carriage which he was in, which I thought was super sweet. I was saying to Daniel how bizarre it was to me how all consuming and all encompassing. You know, you went all over London and there was like memorials everywhere. And then as soon as the funeral was over, it was just, we're done, moving on. I went into London last night and it was just like normal. It's like so weird not having everything at half-mast and everything like we've had for the last 2 weeks. So bizarre, but it was super fascinating and humbling to be a part of history, because the Queen, who by the way who was hilarious. I've seen so many funny Queen edits which were amazing. Perhaps I can do one of those if you're interested. I'll show you guys. But yeah, she just had a jubilee, so she'd just been in reign for 70 years. She is the longest reigning monarch, I think, in the modern world we're ever gonna have again, because we're not going to give the crown to a 12-year-old like we used to do in the medieval times. So there'll be no one that really matches her. So she was an icon. There'll be no one else that can come close. And yeah, it's weird having a king, having to sing God Save the King. I'll tell you what I'm mildly raging about, and it's so minor, and I'm aware it's absolutely like first world problems, is that my citizenship ceremony, which will be in like 2 years or something, part of that is you have to swear allegiance to the crown, and you have to sing the national anthem to a portrait of the monarch, who it was usually the Queen, and now it's going to be Charles, which is fine, but I've just always envisioned it being the Queen, so it's hard to I don't know, rectify that in your mind that it's not, you know, she was the country's grandma. So it's weird having a king, but we will carry on. I think a lot of the time the grieving is also the grieving of normality. One, everyone's grandma, but also, you know, all the money is going to change, all the stamps, which things that you never even considered and were just like standard and normal are going to change, and that's weird and hard to rectify. So yeah, it will be interesting few years. Charles will be interesting. I know he's a big advocate for the environment, so I hope he brings that forward into his monarchy. Is that what you call it? His leadership, his kingship. Let me know your thoughts. What did you think of the Queen's funeral? Were you devastated? Were you carrying on as normal? Were you happy? A lot of people were happy. I personally think they were being contrarian and just trying to be whatever, but some people were happy because they wanted to be mean. So yeah, tell me your comments below. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And remember to hit subscribe because I am back properly now. I have my spark back. Thanks so much for your patience and your time, and yeah,